What's up, guys? 1-0 yesterday, a winning day as we hit on the only play that I had in San Diego State. No sweat, really. Easy winner there. I think my handicap was probably correct on that one. Not really too many exciting things yesterday in college basketball. I guess the Houston-Texas A&M finish was very exciting. Other than that, it was kind of like everything kind of went as expected, and Marquette kind of had a close call there. I thought they would win a little bit more easily than they did. The Houston one was crazy, though, actually. The Texas A&M hit just a three-pointer where the shooter was falling over basically at the buzzer, where they had no choice but to fire up a three. Like, it looked like the game was over. They had missed a three on what looked like the final possession, got an offensive rebound, and missed another three where the shooter he didn't even have both feet on the ground when he shot that final three. It was kind of a one-handed thing, just like we need to throw something up there. Looked like the game was over, and it was still out of bounds off of Houston with 1 second left. So in regulation, so Texas A&M still had possession. It's like, oh, all right, they're gonna get one more three-pointer off here, like if they're lucky, basically, and they did at the top of the key. The shooter, I wish I remembered who it was. He was just falling over, and it went in, sent the game into overtime. Texas A&M had gone on like a 13-4 run or something to close regulation. It looked like they were completely done. But now at this point, like the tables had turned, and it looked like Houston was in trouble with Texas A&M having all the momentum at that point, being able to score a lot. This is a really high scoring performance against a Houston defense that's good. It is very unlike Houston to be giving up that many points, which is really, really wild. But Houston was able to get it together. Even though they were in foul trouble, they still were able to do it in the end and get out of there with the win. So that was probably the most exciting of the games yesterday. Unless, am I missing anything about yesterday's games? I do not know. Well, Clemson pulled off an upset over Baylor, which I'd mentioned that as a lean yesterday. So that also did happen. Everything else was just kind of the teams that were favored just kind of won fairly easily in every other game. Clemson getting through. Unfortunately, I had New Mexico getting through that game. So I was right about Baylor getting knocked out, just not by the right team in that case, which is unfortunate. We move on to today. I'm skipping the NHL card. There are only two games, in the NHL. Vegas St. Louis is interesting because that's like a wild card battle. Actually, both of these games could be interesting. LA Kings and Vancouver is a matchup between two playoff teams, and Vegas and St. Louis, that's like a wild card battle there. Vegas is sitting in the final wild card spot in the West right now, and St. Louis is the top team out of the wild card spot right now, 4 points behind Vegas. So that one is at least interesting. I'm going to have 2 plays today. I'm going to go to college basketball. This is going to be where the first play is, which this is going to be in the CBI. The CBI, I mean, nobody's going to pay attention to it, but maybe this is going to be a day where some bettors, if they're still hanging around in Vegas, if they were there for the weekend and they're still there trying to get some final bets in after the first weekend of March Madness ends, and then you still have some college basketball fever and want to get involved in something, this might be the game maybe they'll get involved in the CBI, because you got the 1 seed in the CBI playing in this game, and it's at noon today Eastern. So the people will have to wake up early for this one in Vegas, though, because it'll be at 9 a.m. Vegas time, that means. But the CBI has a weird structure where I believe it's a 15-team tournament this year, and the 1 seed, which is High Point, instead of facing a 16 seed in the first round, they just get a bye into the second round. So this is the second round now. So they are the 1 seed, and they're facing the winner of the 8-9 matchup. Interestingly, in that tournament, the 2 seed also lost to the 15 seed. The 15 seed Chicago State advanced and is played today against Fairfield. These tournaments, it's all about motivation, man. So you can see some of the higher seeded teams in this tournament just not really have that much motivation and just fall apart. That was UC San Diego was the 2 seed that lost there. An unfortunate way to end the season for them, really, because they had a really good season. They were one of the only teams in the Big West that beat UC Irvine, and UC San Diego was not only not eligible for the tournament yet because they're in transition, but they weren't even eligible to play in the Big West tournament, which is not something I've seen before. Usually when a team's ineligible for the NCAA tournament, they still by like the conference rules or whatever, are still allowed to play in the conference tournament. They were not even able to do that. So that was maybe disappointing for them. So that could have gone both ways for UC San Diego and the CBI. Really, like, are they going to show up like really motivated, or are they just going to be like really disappointed? I don't know. Like, I would almost think that they might even have had something to prove, though. Like, oh, you're not allowing us to play in the postseason, but we get into this CBI tournament. Like, I would think that maybe that would put a chip on their shoulder. So I don't know what was up with that, with them losing as a pretty big favorite, I think, to Chicago State. But whatever. I'm going to be fading High Point in this game. High Point sitting at 4.5 as a favorite, 61% of the cash and the tickets. Of course, High Point, the public, if they're getting involved in this game, of course, they're going to be on High Point. High Point has the nicer looking record, and they are the 1 seed in this tournament, and they score. And that's what the public likes, teams that can score a lot of points and have a good offense. But High Point also does not have a good defense. I mean, neither of these teams have a good defense, but High Point's is actually the worst of the two suspect defenses here. So you are getting the slightly better defense. Neither of these teams are good defensively, but you are getting the somewhat better defense in Cleveland State and getting points with them. So that is one thing that I look for. That's one thing that I like. But the thing that I like the most about this, really, that puts this into like a territory where it's like we got to play this game, is that Cleveland State is at an advantage because they already have a game under their belt in this tournament. And not only that, but they looked ugly in doing so. They looked about as ugly as you could possibly look in a win as they beat Northern Colorado. Cleveland State was a favorite by a couple of points in that game. Neither team shot well at all in the game. Northern Colorado shot really badly from 8.7%, but Cleveland State 26.7%, also really bad. Both teams shot really badly from the field, but Cleveland State was able to get out of there with a win 51-49. Like, who's going to want to play on Cleveland State against a high-scoring, high-point team after Cleveland State just won a game scoring 51 points? I don't think anybody's going to really want that. But, of course, that was a pretty slow-paced game as well. Just bad shooting. I think Northern Colorado probably plays a slow pace as well. Actually, they do not. I'm kind of surprised. They are a faster tempo team at 57th. Cleveland State is definitely slower than that. Yeah, down at 193, which isn't the slowest, but they're in like the slower half of teams. High Point does want to play a little bit faster than that. They're at 109th tempo-wise, and Cleveland State's at like 190 or something. So you're getting points with the slightly less bad defense with Cleveland State here, and a team that likes to play at a little bit of a slower pace in Cleveland State. So I think that is an advantage to Cleveland State as well. I actually like these teams that are coming off like a win where they looked really ugly in doing so, because they tend to like have motivation, turn it around. They get to like refocus some things, and they tend to be a little bit undervalued in the market. So I like all that. But, and I still haven't gotten to it, the thing that puts this completely over the top is that Cleveland State played in this tournament already and looked ugly, yes, all that. But on top of that, High Point, as I alluded to a little while ago, they have not played yet in this tournament. So they're the 1 seed, so they got to bye through the first round. So they have not played yet. So I think that's a big advantage to Cleveland State. People are going to be like, oh, but Cleveland State played yesterday, so they are the much less rested team. Yeah, fine, but Cleveland State had a lot of time off prior to the game yesterday. Their last game before that was getting knocked out of the Horizon. They only lost to that Oakland team that beat Kentucky. They only lost to that team by 3 to get knocked out of the Horizon tournament in the semifinals, which I believe was on March 11th. So they had essentially 2 weeks off and then came into this game. And of course, when you have that much time off, you could be a little bit rusty. So that's another thing that I like about playing Cleveland State here, is now they have a game under their belt. They get to gather some momentum. They didn't look very good in the win, but they won. They got out of there. That's going to give them some momentum, and it gets them used to playing again after having a couple weeks off. And this tournament is neutral site stuff. So this game is in Daytona, Florida, and that means that Cleveland State already has a game under their belt in this arena as well, in this venue. And that's also an advantage when you're playing in an unfamiliar venue and you've already played a game there and you've gotten a game under your belt. Not only do you get the like opening game, like nervousness, the jitters out of the way because you got that game out of the way already. You played, you won. Now you got some confidence. So now you're not coming into this game cold, but also you're already used to like the sight lines and shooting and playing in this arena already. And if you're a team that relies on efficient offense like High Point and you have not played yet in this arena, I think that's also a disadvantage. So Cleveland State has that advantage of having already played in this arena one game, and that was yesterday. Before was High Point. They have not played at all since they got bounced by 1 point as the 1 seed in the Big South. They won the Big South regular season title, and they got upset by Longwood, losing in a close game it was a close game at the end by 1 point. High Point was actually way ahead in that game too, and they just totally imploded. And they actually had a pretty bad shooting performance in that game. And Longwood shot out of their minds from three, 53.3% from three from Longwood, as they started jacking up the threes to try to get back in that game. High Point was a 7.5-point favorite, man. So this could also be a pretty disappointed High Point team. Like, do they want to be here in this tournament? I think that might be questionable as they're watching other teams play well in the NCAA tournament. They watched the team that beat them, Longwood, get absolutely destroyed by Houston, and maybe they're thinking like that should have been us. We would have put in a better performance than Longwood did. I mean, how could you be worse, really? And that Longwood team was the team that beat High Point. High Point might be feeling a little bit aggravated and not in a good way. I don't think they might be a disappointed team coming into this. Like they absolutely should have won that game. That was the last game they played. They had a double-digit lead in the second half. Looked like they were running away with the game in the Big South semifinals, and they were going to be heading to the finals where Longwood also upset UNC Asheville. And UNC Asheville was kind of in a bad spot there, having played the later game in a game that went into at least one overtime coming into that game. UNC Asheville looked like they just had nothing left in the tank and lost to Longwood. That could have been High Point getting the win there over UNC Asheville and getting in. And they had the huge lead against Longwood and just completely blew it. Totally blew it. So this High Point team definitely could be a very disappointed team here. And on top of that, they have not played since that game. So they might still be feeling that disappointment. It might just hang them over all the way into now. They have not played since that game, which was March 9th, because the Big South was actually one of the earlier conferences to play. The Horizon with Cleveland State played a little bit later than that. So Cleveland State actually played a couple days later than that, and then got to play a game already yesterday in this tournament to get that game under their belt. So I think Cleveland State has the advantage here because they played in this venue already, and they've played much more recently than High Point has, so they're used to playing again. So I think they have the momentum here. I think it's a momentum spot for Cleveland State, and I think maybe they're going to be motivated here and show up because they know they're facing a pretty good High Point team here. Cleveland State, they're not like High Point, in which like High Point expected to win the Big South this year at the season. They expected to be in the tournament, and they got knocked out. They got upset in a game they should have won in their conference tournament, whereas Cleveland State, they didn't really have, they thought they could potentially win the Horizon, but it wasn't like they totally dominated the Horizon and absolutely were like the favorite to win the Horizon or anything like that. That wasn't the case. It was more like, we want to win the Horizon and we have a shot to do it, but they didn't get there. But I think Cleveland State's going to be in the better motivational spot because of that too. Maybe they have a little bit of something to prove, and they know they're facing a High Point team that is the 1 seed in this tournament and is a little bit of a better team than they are, of course, as you can see with the line favoring High Point. But Cleveland State, like I said, they have the very slightly better defense, even though the best unit on the court here is certainly High Point's offense. High Point has a very, very efficient offense, but their defense is so bad that they tend to get themselves into trouble. Whereas Cleveland State, they're a little bit more balanced, even though they're way worse offensively. They're just slightly better defensively and play a little bit slower, so they might be able to turn this game into an uglier game, but I just like the momentum aspect of this, man. So Cleveland State plus 4.5 will be one play. Then we'll go into the NBA here. The NBA, I almost was not even going to have a play in the NBA because there really is not much that I like here. But then I looked at it a little bit further and I said, I'm going to fade the Indiana Pacers. I just don't think the Indiana Pacers are in a very good spot here, man. And this is the NBA here, so it's like yes, you have to look at like how motivated are these teams as far as they're coming down the stretch run. Like, are these teams going to get into the playoffs, whatever? This game, I don't think. It matters a little bit because Indiana, they are playing to try to avoid the play-in game situation. They're sitting in the 6th seed right now in the Eastern Conference, so Yes, they are trying to avoid the play-in because they're only a half game above both Miami and Philadelphia. But both of those teams have been dealing with a lot of injury problems, man. And Indiana, I think they feel like a little bit safe in that respect just because they know that Miami and Philly are a bit beaten up, and Indiana's kind of got a full team here. And Indiana, I just don't like the spot here for Indiana at all. So I'm going to be laying, it's sitting at 6 points right now on the Clippers. Don't see the percentages yet on this. So this is the last game on the board, 10:30 p.m. Eastern. So I'm playing the earliest game in college basketball, and that game will finish like several hours before this other game even starts. But look at Indiana's schedule, man. This is a brutal, brutal schedule that they're in right now. They're facing a fourth straight road game right now, and they also have another road game coming up after this. It's a back-to-back, although both of these teams are in back-to-backs. And both of these teams are actually in third games of 4 nights, but Indiana is in a back-to-back, a third game in 4, all in different cities, all out on the West Coast. They're playing a fourth game in 6 days, all in different cities, because they played in Detroit before that. And they're playing a fifth game in 8 days, all in different cities, starting with a home loss to Cleveland before they went out on the road, beat Detroit, beat Golden State on the road, and then lost yesterday in a barn burner to LA, 150 to 145. You can't possibly look better in a loss than that, really. Both teams shot absolutely ridiculously. They were both in the mid 50% from the field. They both shot about 50% from 3. That is a crazy game, man. This Indiana team coming out and just scoring a ton there, although they hadn't been scoring as much for this Indiana team as they had been throughout a lot of the season. But they did run into some injuries, but more recently they have had their guys back, like Halliburton, but they've not been putting up like really insane point totals until last night. That game was just extremely high scoring. They played a close game against the LA Lakers, a just absolute barn burner of a game, losing 150 to 145. You put up 145 in a loss, I think, yeah, like recreational guys, bettors are going to take notice on that, and they're going to maybe like look at this and say, we know this is a matchup between two good teams here, but we're going to want Indiana here because Indiana's the team that's fighting to avoid the play-in. That is true. Whereas LA, the Clippers, I mean, they're in a better spot here as far as making the playoffs. They're like pretty secure and having a decent seed in the playoffs. Like they don't have to worry about that. That's true. But this spot is just, it really is bad for Indiana here, man. On a back-to-back after such a high-scoring, crazy game last night where you just go all out, you're like running the court to that degree. Are you really going to have that much left in the tank after that? And this now being your 4th straight road game, 3 games in 4 nights, all on the road, a back-to-back, 4th game in 6 nights, all on the road, scoring over 100, at least 122 in every one of those road games. I think they might run out of steam a little bit here, man. And this might be a better spot for LA, for the Clippers to bounce back a little bit here. Like, I think they're going to show up and want to play here because they played last night as well, yes, but neither of these teams are traveling. That's true, I guess. So I should have said not all in different cities because both of these games are actually in LA, for both LA and for Indiana here. So that's not quite true. So Indiana, yes, they are still playing a back-to-back, a 3rd straight road game in 4 days, and a 4th road game in 6 days. That is true. All of them in different cities, except last night and tonight are both in LA. Okay, yeah, I should clarify that. That is true. Yes. But still, it's a 4th straight road game. It's a back-to-back with both of these games being on the road, whereas LA also played last night. The Clippers played last night. And they lost to the Philadelphia 76ers in kind of embarrassing fashion. They might not want to let that stand, man. The Philadelphia 76ers just kind of handled them and blew them out, man. I mean, Philadelphia shot really kind of ridiculously, 53% from the field, 49% basically from 3, whereas the Clippers had a more off shooting night, and they had 14 turnovers, which I think kind of did them in as well. 76ers only had 8 turnovers. 76ers just had the lead the whole game. It was just a bad performance for the Clippers. So I think the Clippers might want to bounce back here, even though they are also playing a back-to-back. They are also playing a 3rd game in 4 days, and they are also, yes, playing a 4th game in 6 days. But they are only doing that in 2 different cities. They played the first 2 of those games in Portland, and they won both of them. Didn't win by that much in the second one. They won by 13 in the first one, and they won by 8 in the second one. But they had like the lead the whole game, really. And then they just kind of, I think, took their foot off the gas at the end of that. Then in the Philadelphia game, that was technically a return home spot, of course, from a 2-game road stint with both games being in Portland. Still, maybe they were just a little bit distracted coming back home and having home life to get back to and whatever, and didn't totally pay attention to this Philly team. But because they lost that game so ugly, I think this actually is kind of a bounce back spot for the Clippers. And when you have a team that returns from the road, even if it was only a 2-game road trip and they play really poorly in that first game, that second game tends to be a good bounce back spot. They're going to want to get one of these games at home before they have to go back out on the road, man. They don't want to go 0-2 on this road trip, I don't think. So I like the Clippers in this spot, even though they do have to go out and face Philadelphia, and that's going to be a road revenge type of angle coming up after this. I don't think they're going to overlook an Indiana team that just put up 145 last night against the Lakers and is a team that is good, is going to be in the playoffs in some capacity, if you include the play-in at least as the playoffs, if Indiana winds up in those games. And Indiana, a team that can absolutely score and has a really good offense. So I think the Clippers are going to be focused here, and I think it's a spot where Indiana might be running a bit more out of steam here. So I like the situation better for the Clippers. I don't like it for the Indiana Pacers very much at all. So we'll lay the 6 points with the LA Clippers, and that's going to do it for me, man. Those 2 plays today. College basketball, Cleveland State in the CVI plus 4.5, and in NBA, the LA Clippers -6. Let's get it. Start the week on the right foot. Peace.